All right, welcome back to Keepin' the Comic, and we're diving back into another Venom War Deadpool issue here with the finale of the series. And in this one, they continue to keep the fun and the action going, although I'm not a huge fan of the very ending, and you'll kind of understand why. Now, what we get to see, though, is the conclusion of the fight between Deadpool and Wolverine's son, aka Jimmy Hudson, aka Poison, which leads to a very interesting twist in this one that I probably should have saw coming, but still didn't really expect it. So when we pick up back on this here, we see Silence and the other monsters of Metropolis still fighting off the Zombiote outbreak over in Manhattan, New York. And we also see once again where Poison is still on a berserker rampage right now, who is killing everybody, including his fellow monsters. Now, the issue here is that this is creating too much extra work for the group to have to fight off both the Zombiotes and also having to fight off Poison as well. So Deadpool is like, okay, listen, I will take on Poison while you guys focus on the Zombiotes. Now, if you have not been keeping up here with the series and are wondering, like, why does Deadpool look so different? Well, that's because in the previous issue before this one, after Poison started going berserk, he ends up basically killing Deadpool's symbiote dog daughter named Princess. So to save her, he ends up bonding with her, and voila, here we have what he calls Princess Deadpool. So when he goes to attack Poison, as typical with any sort of Deadpool comic, right? The dialogue here is pretty funny. The first thing that Deadpool does is that he calls him Bub for obvious reasons. And then he asks him this question. He's like, didn't you ever watch John Wick in your universe? Because as a reminder here, Poison is from the old Ultimate Universe. And of course, with Poison hurting Deadpool's dog, per se, he's now about to go on a rage, Keanu Reeves style. But honestly, Jimmy Hudson is a problem, man. Dude slashes Deadpool right in the face, blood splashing all over, and then he drives those claws right under his chin so much that Deadpool's tongue was just like hanging out while he's screaming at the same time. So to counter, Princess Deadpool decides, all right, I'm gonna bite Jimmy's head off. Chomp. Now, when Jimmy's head is on the inside now, we see Deadpool's head pop out of the inside part of Deadpool's mouth. Listen, it kind of sounded weird when I said that, but you just have to take a look here at the picture to understand what I'm saying. My bad, y'all. Either way, it's only fitting that this is where Deadpool would be housed, considering that this dude never shuts up in the first place. So while Jimmy is stuck in between the teeth, he begins to use that tongue, that like long tongue, to try and hit Deadpool in the face. So then Princess Deadpool does that hawk toi and spits him out. By the way, is that like still a thing right now, hawk toi? Listen, either way, let's just move on. So here's where we get this typical picture of them charging at each other. And here is where Deadpool tries to appeal a bit to Jimmy's better nature, which ultimately is just the writer giving you a quick summary as to what has happened to Jimmy Hudson throughout his life so far. So he tells him he knows what has happened to him, getting pulled from another dimension, getting infected by alien symbiote killers, turning him into a monster, how that's really messed him up, but that's also still no reason for him to turn on his allies. Also, if you want a more detailed breakdown here as to who Jimmy Hudson is, I did cover that here in the very first issue of the series. That's going to be linked down below in the description. So then Princess Deadpool, right, does their form of Hulk smash, hitting Jimmy down. But of course, Jimmy counters and then flings them off, which then leads us to getting this amazing shot. Like, personally, I love it because Jimmy lets out a roar, like a massive roar, while it looks like he's pulling out his bone claws even further. It's just a really amazing shot. But before the fight could go on here, Silence shouts out to Deadpool because, listen, there is a Zombiote outbreak going on right now while these two idiots are over here fighting, right? So she lets him know, like, my anti-venom right now is slowing the Zombiotes down, And if you don't get Poison under control, talking to Deadpool, we're ultimately gonna get overwhelmed here and get taken out. So Deadpool tries to wrap up Jimmy right here with his tendrils to restrain him, which may have seemed like a good idea at the time, except for the fact that Jimmy got spikes, you know, on his body, and then he starts to push those things out, which now is piercing through Deadpool's body, which to Deadpool's credit, I will say, at least they kept holding on for dear life while screaming bloody murder at the same time, which only ultimately lasted here for a moment, because then Jimmy breaks free and then he starts like running down an alleyway. But when he starts to see that the Zombiotes, that they're now attacking other civilians, he's like, okay, let me snap out of this frenzy that I'm in right now to try to go save the people, which to me personally seemed a little bit too simple and easy to happen here. But either way, I'm gonna leave it alone. But listen, really quickly, if you could do us a favor on the channel here, if you are enjoying this video so far, if you could please leave a like on this video, that would really help us out a lot. So when we jump back to this here, Jimmy is back in the fight now, along with the other monsters of Metropolis. It's like a really cool shot of all of them fighting all of these Zombiotes here, right? And Mummy, like, he has one of them in the background in a headlock. We see Morbius, Frankenstein, and Man-Thing here over to the right. We got Silence. This is a dope shot here. Like, Silence is like clubbing one of the Zombiotes in the head, which just made me laugh. And of course, we got Jimmy and we got Deadpool here doing their thing. Now, one thing of note to mention here is that Deadpool tells Jimmy how this is better, how this is more fun instead of them fighting each other here. But then Jimmy says back to him, and this is really interesting, he's like, this changes nothing. I know why you sought me out, and when this is over, I want you to finish what you started. Now, what gives us some insight here, if we go back to the very first issue here of the series, Deadpool, Silence, and Princess, they were already out on the streets of fighting the Zombiotes, right? Now, Deadpool was like, listen, we're gonna escape here, and brings them into the sewers to head over to find Monster Metropolis. Now, he did mention that the reason why he came here was for a little bit of a side hustle, but he never told us exactly what that side hustle was for, which then leads him to seeing Jimmy Hudson before he transformed into Poison, and then the Zombiotes, and then again back to the streets, and here we are now. So the answer to the question as to why he did this will come in a little bit here, but before we get there, they gotta contain this Zombiote thing first. Now, Silence is hoping that the monsters will take Jimmy back after all of this is over, but Morbius, who was the leader of the Metropolis, is pretty frank about it, pun intended, that he doesn't want him back. And I mean, look, when you know someone is like this, that is unhinged the way that he is, would you really want him back anyways? Because you know that at any point in time, this dude could go berserk and ultimately kill you and everybody around him. Now, there is a moment of victory for them, right? We see the shot with like all the Zombiotes around them are pretty much essentially dead and on the floor, but it's really ultimately just for a small moment here. So what they do in the interim is that they work to get the civilians off of the streets. Deadpool, he unbonds with Princess, and now Jimmy, he can still feel that there's some danger that's out there, which of course, we know the Zombiotes are gonna come back, right? More importantly though, that rage that is inside of him, he can still feel that it wants to come out, which is when Deadpool says, maybe we should get this done then, huh? Which leaves Silence to ask the question, and we got the same question too, get what done? Which is when we see Mobius. Yes, Agent Mobius from the TVA. And he says, well, he pops up and is like, we'll take it from here. We'll handle the asset. Now, who he's talking about, you guessed it, is Jimmy Hudson, which of course is gonna have Silence kind of like pissed off, like, yo, don't take him, like, if you're gonna raise a gun towards him, then, you know, whatever, like, she kind of starts getting angry and starts saying some things here, but Jimmy's like, it's okay, let them do what they do, because ultimately Jimmy kind of wants to end this thing too, right? Like, he knows that he's off the wall right now, and he feels like it's probably best if he just goes. And then Mobius says to Deadpool, he's like, as agreed, here is your finder's fee. Now, Deadpool tries to like get the TVA to help them out with the Zombiote thing here, but Mobius is like, yo, this is not my department, and then they kind of just leave off here with Jimmy. Now, naturally, Silence she's gonna feel some betrayal here, right? Because she now realizes that them going to Monster Metropolis, it wasn't for them to escape. It wasn't for them to be able to get help. It was ultimately just because he wanted to satisfy his own needs to get Jimmy so that he could get his finder's fee here from the TVA. But before they could get too deep into the whole thing, more Zombiotes, they start to show up, which puts them into a whole other battle again here versus the Zombiotes. And it kind of gets repetitive after this point. The bottom line is that Deadpool takes credit also as well here for the monsters helping. Silence is just calling him out on his crap. Then later on, we see that Silence gets appointed as the Monsters of Metropolis liaison and then starts to try to push this initiative here of coexisting, where the monsters would be able to coexist on the streets with the people. Deadpool kind of runs off to another mission here towards the very end. And honestly, I really don't think that this was a very good ending, if you ask me. I didn't expect necessarily a happy one here, but Deadpool coming away looking like a jerk was always going to be predictable. We didn't expect anything to change from that perspective, you know, and change nothing there. However, I can't help but feel like there should have been a different ending here for Jimmy. I sure hope that we do see him at some point in time here in the future, and I could talk a little bit more about it, but I really want to hear what you guys have to say here about the ending of this particular issue. Also, we do have a Venom War playlist here with all the previous issues to this particular series here and other times as well as the main storyline for Venom War, all baked into one big playlist here. And also, as I mentioned before, if you can help us here with even a like on this video, that really helps to move this video out to a wider audience. Also, consider subscribing if you are new to the channel. Check out our links that are in the description here where you can follow us on social media and also our Discord. And as always, thank you guys so much for kicking it with Keepin' It Comic. Bye.